Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Contour community meeting. Today is May 5th or May 6th, depending on where you live. And per usual, we get a bunch of things that we want to go over today. We got some status updates. We got some issue discussions. If you want to add something to the meeting notes, if you want to discuss something or have something that you want to bring up, you can add them to the meeting notes or just speak up as well. That works too. And with that, I'm going to share my screen so you all can see the agenda for today. All right. The first thing is, of course, what have we been working on? Nick.
Yeah. So a couple of important bugs that we found soon after 1.4 came out. The ingress status updating was I missed a thing where if you set an ingress class, the status updating that wasn't Contour, then the status updating wouldn't work. Classic testing failure. So yeah, it was pretty easy to fix though. There's a fix already merged for it. So yeah, thank you to C10 for reporting that one. That was very useful. And then the next one after that is the one that's fixed by 2483. James, I couldn't find which issue, if there was an issue associated with this in the 10 minutes I spent just before this.
Yeah, the issue I think is actually a pretty old one. I can dig it up and attach it, but it's something that's been around since TLS pass-through days.
Yeah. Could you just talk through it a little bit and how this fixes it?
Sure. So I think the underlying issue is that HTTP2 spec is pretty aggressive in how it allows clients to coalesce connections to servers. So you're allowed to reuse the connection you're allowed to use the connection to a host name based on whether they're presented certificate matches. So say you connected to a server and you presented the host name A, and the server responded with a wildcard cert, then you're allowed to reuse that connection for hostname B as long as B matches the hostname, as long as B matches the wildcard cert, even though you originally asked for hostname A on that TLS connection. So that was always an issue with the way, but people have reported that in the past based on the TLS pass-through, because there can be ambiguity at the Envoy filter chain level. But what happens now that we, in 1.4, we landed basically strong SNI bindings, everyone who is using wildcards is going to hit this too. So you imagine you have a set of SNI, a set of server names, and each server name has only the routes for that server. So the server name you ask for as a client gets exactly the routes for that server name. But if each one is presenting a wildcard cert, then the browser will just reuse any old connection to get to any old server. And on a good percentage of the time, you'll just get 404s.
Yeah, okay. And then, so this one fixes that by using Envoy's lower filter mechanism for now.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about this whole thing, honestly.
Yeah, neither am I. I think the reason I wanted to raise that was that we use it for now, with the idea being that we're going to see what we can do about getting upstream Envoy to add a mechanism to do this. It's effectively an Envoy bug, almost, like pretty much, that it doesn't. I mean, it's a bit debatable whether or not it's a bug, but it's definitely at least a misfeature that it doesn't allow you to do this in some way. And so we would like to sort of get upstream Envoy to do that either by.
Yeah, it's kind of an oversight. It would be nice for it to be kind of natively supported in some Envoy thing. I think the logistics of that are sort of going to be interesting, because I suppose we'll also need a discussion with the Envoy maintainers. If we're going to push a fix for it, then we would also want to discuss with the Envoy maintainers whether the fix goes into the V2 or the V3 API.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
And I suspect that they'll clearly they'll probably want to default to V3, and there might be some discussion around whether we should update V2 as well for it.
Yeah, that's true. So yes, that's another thing to note for everybody is that Envoy's API deprecation policy is now like very aggressive. So it's once per year they will do a major rev of the XDS APIs, and so the XDS APIs will only live for 2 years from go to woe. So yeah, we need to make sure that we keep on top of that. Yeah, this one is pretty important. The main point I wanted to raise here though is that although in this specific instance we're using a Lua filter to fix the thing, I just wanted to be very clear that this doesn't mean that we're going to be adding anything that lets you configure your own Lua filters in the near future. Just wanted to make that 100% clear.
Yeah, I think people, if anyone's
implementation detail.
Sorry, Nick.
That's okay.
Yeah, if anyone's building their own Envoy and trying to be aggressive in reducing the number of filters they build into Envoy, then they need to be aware of this.
That's a good point, James. We actually need to update the filter list, the list of enabled features as part of this PR.
Yeah, let me check that. I think that the list we published was really broad, so let me just check whether it's enabled. 2 secs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, while you're checking that, we can probably move on because I think we've covered that one pretty well. Yeah, I've got sorry, I'm going to put a link in there to 2480. Thank you. Yeah. So this is a PR from Savithru. Thank you for Savithru. I don't know if you're on the call, but yeah, thank you to him for just finding a problem with the docs and PRing in a fix. Much appreciated. Only a small problem, but yeah, a big help to him and other people who have that specific thing. I think, yeah, thanks, James. Yeah. Okay, right. So yeah, you'll need to add that, James, to the PR, please. Yeah, this is the update to the GitHub labels. James has helped push this through using some of the Kubernetes tooling. James, can you talk about this for a sec?
Yeah, sure. I think I don't have a lot of the history around the GitHub labels, but there's a couple of issues that I wanted to try and address with this. First is the project has more repos now than it has done in the past. So I felt that it would be good for us to have like a consistent grammar or a schema of labels across all the repos in the project contour project. The second thing is I think a lot of the labels grew organically as people needed them for different projects. So I wanted to kind of consolidate this into a single place where we could document, in a public way what we expect the labels, what meaning we think the labels has, and maybe talk about how we use them. The schema generally follows Kubernetes labels schema, Kubernetes project labels, because I think most of the people in the maintainer group and the Contour community are going to have at least seen and have some familiarity with that Kubernetes schema. I kind of expect the schema to change a bit over time. I think it's one of those things where the change is the good thing because we want the label schema to reflect what we're actually doing. So no one should consider the label schema as carved in stone. But I think now I'm pleased that we have the tooling to be able to update and document the labels and continue to make them useful for everyone.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I've already started making sure that we set those lifecycle ones as soon as we have a look at a ticket. Even if we just put lifecycle investigating, it's a nice signal to everybody that yes, we've seen the ticket and we're interested in looking at it more. Cool. Well, I think we'll go on to. I just wanted to quickly run through an issue, but Steve, do you want to talk about your demo first?
Sure, we can. So I got asked to do a, there's nothing much here on this page, but there's a VMware Users Group. So it's one of the Kubernetes SIGs. So I think it's for folks that use VMware technologies with Kubernetes. So I'm going to chat a little bit, or at least I'm trying to build it out now, of how we can deploy some things like Contour and Gimbal to on-premise environments, so like bare metal kind of places. So how can we route traffic to different clusters, different places, that sort of thing. So I'm going to try and leverage, I'm obviously going to leverage Contour, but also going to do some things with Gimbal as well, I think, to help route some things around. So that's all I've come up with so far. The talk is on Thursday at 11 Pacific. So if anyone's interested, come stop by. I think the link is here for the Zoom meeting and stuff, and I'm sure it'll be recorded.
And the biggest thing, by the way, and thank you, Steve, for driving this, is that as a lot of customers are playing around in this cloud native ecosystem and space, but they still have a lot of apps and VMs. So it's going to be every enterprise customer there has hybrid installations. And when I say hybrid, I mean some VMs, some containers, and they're going to need traffic and interconnection between all of those components. So Contour can play that role by helping kind of bridge that gap. So that's why it's super important. And Steve is going to give them some demo, and we're going to give them some information to see, how do you bridge this old world with the new world?
This is great. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, awesome.
I think it'd be great to drop a link to that in the in the Contour channel on the Slack as well.
Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll tweet it out as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonas.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonas. And the Kubernetes VMware User Group has 1,000 people for the first time.
Oh, neat. Okay. So, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm self-interested here, but this is an issue that I raised. I've raised this one because I think this is blocking a whole bunch of other features that we'd all really like to work on. Amongst them being, things like external auth, I think the rate limiting, maybe even the tracing as well. One of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is that if Contour accepts config, Contour should make information about that config available to the user who configured it. Right now, a lot of that should be done on a per HTTP proxy basis. If you've configured a feature on your HTTP proxy, you should be able to see from your HTTP proxy, that the feature that you've configured is working. You should be able to tell. Maybe there's a thing there. Maybe there's something there that tells you about it. Maybe there's something else. But basically, we need a lot more information in the HTTP proxy status stanza about what the HTTP proxy is doing. There's a couple of things I've got in flight right now to do this. CRDs now can have what's called a status sub-resource, which is the same as a lot of the other Kubernetes core objects. What that means is that when you update the part of the object that is the status part, it requires actually using a different REST endpoint on the Kubernetes side to actually do that. The other thing that means is that if you push a YAML that holds the object, if it includes any information in the status stanza, that information is silently discarded. So there is a bit of a behavior change there, but the idea being that the access to update the status is controlled separately from access to actually create the spec, and with the idea that a controller, in this case Contour, should be the thing that's updating the status, and only that should be updating the status. You as the end user shouldn't be able to touch the status. This is a pretty common pattern in Kubernetes, and in the past we hadn't done it because when I tried to do it initially with HTTP proxy, it broke some things. So this time I've gone back and There's a PR up to enable this. James has some comments on it. I'll address those today. So we should be able to get that in pretty soon. Once I've done that, then I'm going to be adding in the first item in this list here, the ability to see how to reach the HTTP proxy. I'm literally going to pick up the ingress status load balancer stanza and drop it into HTTP proxy. I have considered doing something different here, but I think that this is close enough to a ecosystem-wide standard now that that it's probably it's not worth reinventing the wheel. So that's also in train. I've got PR halfway done to do that. It's not all that hard, although there might be some refactoring involved. So those are the easy bits. The harder bits are, we need to have a general way to expose this status information on a HTTP proxy and have it be an extensible way to do it. Now, the way that you do that, the sort of the API standard way to do that is to use a list, an array of conditions. Conditions are a type that's they're sort of it's like a subclass type. So a condition has to have a couple of properties and it's basically essentially like a Go interface with a little bit extra. And so you can say this, basically the way you do it in Go is that you define this thing as being a slice of interfaces, and then you make sure that the conditions you add all fulfill that interface, and then you can extend the conditions with additional fields by creating your own special conditions. So the idea here is that I'm going to add a slice of conditions to the status stanza of the HTTP proxy, and then start thinking about what special conditions we can add to cover some of the things that we need to do. Now, this blocks, as you can see, it blocks a lot of issues and that's because for a while we've had a big bucket of things that were, hey, we need to fix status, to be able to do these things. And so I had a previous crack at that before I knew about conditions. That was way too complicated. And so, I really want to have a think about some of the things that I thought about there, some of the other features that we need, and make sure that the thing that we put in, the way that we put the conditions in, is sort of conforms to the API standards, and at the same time is extensible enough that we can add all the information we need to. So yeah, I just wanted to talk through a little bit what I was doing here, and then, in case anyone in the community had questions about it, then this would be the time to answer it. I guess from looking at the list of people in the room, it looks like it's, aside from the maintainers and other Contour team people, Micaiah and Daniel, it's pretty much just you guys. So yeah,
Daniel loves conditions; they're his favorite.
So yes, I am very much aware of obviously of the discussion about condition polarity that came out of Services API. So it'll be something that I think about. I'm talking to the Knative guys about what they did around duck typing conditions to see if we can do something that's a little similar to that. I think that some of their thoughts there are pretty good. So yeah, I'm just interested in any thoughts anyone has about this.
My first, I think they're okay. Let me untangle my tongue. I think this is great. I'm super in favor. My only comment is that there's the KEP, which attempts to standardize the condition struct. So we should have a look at that and see if we can, I don't know if we can adopt that directly or just, copy paste it or something.
Yeah, so the problem there is that looks like some members of SIGArch are like, yeah, conditions should be, having conditions be positive polarity makes sense. That should be the new recommendation. Other members of SIGArch are like, no. We design conditions to be negative polarity. They should, a presence of a condition should indicate a non-wanted state. And so there's a philosophical discussion there about like what conditions are actually supposed to be for. So
I think we might be talking about different KEPs.
Okay,
There's the KEP I'm talking about standardizes the struct, standardizes the Go struct type, but it doesn't say anything about the polarity. So
okay.
It just standardizes the names of the fields and the types of the fields.
Okay.
So we could still use that for either polarity, depending on what we.
Yeah, if you could ping me that one, that would be good. So yeah, and I'm talking to Evan from Knative about, he's been the one who's been doing a lot of the stuff about duck typing of conditions and things like that. So I'm going to talk to him and try and work with him to understand what they're thinking of and see what we can do about it.
Do we have any thoughts on how we're going to start doing this? Like, are we going to push forward what we have now into this, or have to have design, I guess, for all the different types of things we'd want to set?
So the idea here is, the reason to use conditions is that it's just a slice of condition objects. And so as you decide you need different information, you can just add another condition into that slice, and you don't need to specify, like, the good part is you kind of don't need to design too much up front. You just need to sort of set out the contract of what a condition is, and then you can add in whatever conditions you like and decide on the behavior of those conditions as you sort of add in the behavior. That is literally the reason why conditions are there, is because people were finding it too hard to, if you put fields in, then you can't change their name or, do that because of API guarantees. So a slice of conditions, you can change the behavior of that without breaking the API guarantees as easily. So I definitely do want to spend some time thinking about the sorts of information we do and how we would represent it in conditions. But I think that most of what we need to do should be coverable with conditions. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. I was just more of figuring out like the what, because you still need to have some thought around what you'd want to put in there, I think, so we don't get redundant or get, I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is not super easy, but yeah, there's lots of things that we could probably pick out, which would be interesting for various folks in terms of what they want to get out of the system.
Yeah.
And then also being careful that we don't overexpose things, that we don't give too much information for folks that maybe shouldn't have some of the information. So. Yeah.
So I think the first things that I was thinking of were things like what we talked about earlier in the previous my previous attempt at doing something about status, and stuff that you raised before. Things like what conditions have been delegated to me, and by that I mean routing conditions, not status conditions. We made a bad naming choice there, unfortunately, because we didn't know about status conditions at the time. So now we have routing conditions and status conditions. But yeah, so now we can at least tell, like, the status conditions are a good way to tell people about what routing conditions their HTTP proxy will be used with. If they're imported in an import tree, then there's a way for us to surface that information, for example. James, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether you'd thought about compatibility. So in status, we have the status.
Yep.
We have validity and description or something.
Yeah. So I think going forward, we can't remove that. That's part of the V1 contract. I expect that will effectively be a roll-up, be essentially the same thing as a roll-up condition, where it's a sum, like, across all of the conditions. Some of them might be warnings, some of them might be errors. If there's one or more error conditions that render the thing not valid, then that field will be set to valid or valid in, like, as it is now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the ready condition is pretty, de facto standard for that role.
Yeah.
So this is sort of just reflecting what a ready condition would do.
Yeah, basically it'll be, and it's there for API compatibility rather than because we actually need it. I don't know how many people are using that, but hey, we made an API guarantee. Now we've got to stick to it. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we 100% will have some of the standard conditions like ready, because there's no, like, that means that the more we do that sort of standard stuff, the more that our CRD will be able to be consumed easily by people who have built, like, generic Kubernetes type watches. I'm thinking here, not like, there's user facing dashboards like Octant or other ones, but there's also people who have built, like, libraries to watch Kubernetes things. One of the guys from Benoit from Ubisoft raised a good point in this ticket that he would like to be able to use kubectl wait. It looks like maybe kubectl can already wait on conditions. So if we add conditions, you'll be able to wait on any of those conditions, hopefully. I'm going to spend a little bit of time playing with that once I actually add the conditions. Obviously, that all needs to happen before I can try it out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what its weight criteria is, because like if it uses case status, then case status is built around negative polarity conditions.
Yeah, so I think
advice, but it also has special cases for a bunch of types that it knows about as well. So
it's literally you supply it like a JSON path, and then it equals, and then it like equals the state. So I think it's probably general enough to work with whatever we throw at it, but I haven't had a chance to try it yet, so I don't know. Yeah.
So we have about a minute and a half left. I wanted to open it up and see if Danion or Micaiah have any questions or anything they want to ask or contribute before we exit.
Yeah, nothing for me. I'm just pretty much in listen mode. Spent some time today looking into some of the path rewriting support of Contour. And also saw the release notes from 1.4, just to spend some time looking at the client auth support. So,
I'd love any feedback you have, Daniel, on the background doc, the background issue for client auth support.
Oh, okay, let me take a look at the background issue. The one thing that just stood out at me is the release. There's a link to the documentation, and that link is broken.
Okay, thanks. So a link to the documentation for the cert auth?
The client auth, yeah.
Okay, no worries. Thanks. I'll check that.
Let me just double check here really quick. So new release. 1.4, see documentation for how to use a feature. Page
it's
not
probably
found. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, I know what it is. I've missed. I have done the classic error and missed the V in 1.4.0 when I typed that URL because it's done manually.
Easy fix.
Yeah, easy fix. One character fix. Good times. Thanks, man. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And James, you're saying the background issue, the 1090?
I know there's an external auth. So that one is for TLS client auth, but James has raised a background issue for external auth support in HTTP proxy. So
yeah, let me just dig up the link for that and post it in the chat. 2 seconds.
All right.
That's from 2459, right? I mean, I can post that link.
Yep.
Yeah.
Micaiah and I were having we were both smiling when we heard the coalescing conversation at the beginning of the meeting, because it's something that we've been dealing with ourselves with HA proxy. So just kind of put a smile on our face.
One thing I'd mention, I don't remember the exact details. I remember we did see some issues with client compliance with, I think it was the HTTP2 go away response. You're saying HTTP 421. Just a warning, that may not be respected by all clients. So even that may not be a perfect workaround. We ended up saying if you're using the same certificate, you have to assume you may be coalesced. And so we've been saying you have to use your own a specific certificate if you don't want to be coalesced.
Yeah, I think that's a much more sustainable advice now, because, you know, Let's Encrypt and is giving out free certificates. So it's it's hard. I think it's hard to say that, you know, it's very onerous to use a certificate per hostname anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, that means that precludes having a cluster-wide default wildcard certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the configuration that's going to cause you the most issues.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're doing this fix now, is to handle the people who do have a sort of who do use wildcards extensively already.
I guess the benefit for the wildcard is you only have to create the certificate resource once and then you're done. If you're doing well, if host names are coming and going, then you need you probably want some kind of controller to automatically create the certificates for you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're a bit over time. Thanks. Is there anything else, Daniel, Mikhail?
No, I'll take a look at this issue 2459. Thanks for sharing.
No worries. Yeah. So yeah, we're very interested in everyone's feedback on that one. That's one of the big features that we're looking to land soon. I've also got a kind of state of Contour, Contour's landscape, I'm calling it, blog post in the works. That's kind of talking a little bit about where Contour is at and where we're going to be going from here. So yeah, look out for that sometime in the next while, hopefully this week. But I don't know. It takes a surprisingly long time to edit a blog post.
Really quickly though, speaking of the landscape, has there been any updates with moving forward with donating to CNCF?
It's actually an internal voting by the TOC committee right now. That usually takes about a week.
So
usually what CNCF does is they vote internally, so they don't all agree, and then they vote externally to show everybody that they voted. So if the internal vote doesn't come out good, then, and actually Contour has been in that mode since last Tuesday. So we had the discussion today about it in the TOC meeting. They need to get on it.
Yeah.
So good luck with that.
Yeah, very soon, hopefully. Good news soon.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, that's it for this week's episode of the Contour community meeting. Thank you all for joining, and yeah, see you all next week.
See you later.
Bye.